Alright, friendly neighborhood human man back again. Last time I covered a lot of why I love Spidey as a character across his many iterations. But this video is talking about how some of them do it just right or just wrong. And yes, this means I'm probably gonna speak badly about that movie you love. The original Spider-Man trilogy is great. It set the standard, had amazing action sequences, a lovable Parker, and was just goofy enough to satisfy our nerdy needs. But it's not perfect. It hits 2.5 out of 4 of the reasons I gave in my last video for why people, specifically me, love Spider-Man. Are his villains great and reflect the hero's weaknesses and vulnerabilities? Yes. Is his backstory tragic, fitting, and relevant to the character's development? Yes. Is he relatable? Mostly. I think his age factor is lost for the most part due to how mature Tobey Maguire looked. He acted perfectly like an awkward, good-hearted teenager, but he simply looked too old. Sorry, Tobey. And was he fun? Well, no. This is where I feel Sam Raimi's Spider-Man fell short. The quips were few and far between, aside from the cage match. The learning process wasn't filled with enough fun and childlike amusement, and more could have been done to make us feel like he was enjoying his powers. All we really got was the one scene where he first discovered his powers. Just look at the differences in the scenes he confronts Flash in the original versus the Amazing Spider-Man. The original's is accidental. He's forced into nearly every part of it, and he doesn't really seem to take any pleasure in it. He cracks a smile when he sends him flying, but immediately regrets it. Meanwhile, in the Amazing Spider-Man, it's very clear and obvious amusement. He's being a dick, and he knows it, and he loves it. Speaking of which, what did the Amazing Spider-Man miss, and why is it so disliked? Well, as I already mentioned, it nailed the fun aspect. I believe it hit the backstory quite well. Gwen Stacy was certainly a sad moment, as was Ben. The acting is brilliant. But there are far too many villains for any of them to gain much real development, and many of them could have been far more empathetic and closely tied to Peter. It's a pretty far reach to say that Electro is a result of Spider-Man's failures in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. And finally, this has to be the most unrelatable Peter Parker I've ever seen. He's a cool, attractive, smart skater whose nerdy shyness is now super hipster and cute. Nobody ever believed Andrew Garfield was a loser, and nobody ever will. You could believe Tobey Maguire was the bottom of the social ladder, and that's probably the biggest flaw with the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Now, the MCU Spidey, which is personally my favorite cinematic Spidey. What does it get right? It's certainly fun, nobody can deny that. With his childlike charm and awe at his suit and need to prove himself to his father figure, Tom Holland is the perfect casting choice for Peter Parker that I could possibly think of. His backstory is glossed over, which isn't actually a bad thing. We already know it, we've seen it enough, and we're given hints to it, leading us to believe that it shaped him as a person and given him those morals of, with great power comes great responsibility. He even paraphrases it with his own words.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
Eerily similar, right? His villains are kinda there. The main problem with the MCU Spidey is that it's very hard to have a self-contained story in the MCU. Everything serves this higher purpose. The Vulture's main enemy doesn't seem to really be Spidey at all, but rather Tony Stark and the Avengers. The entire plot is tied to the Avengers, and while this is amazing from a continuity and world-building viewpoint, it makes it a lot harder to create villains that are directly tied to Peter himself. But he's certainly a good villain, and he certainly caused Peter to question his morals, alongside the loss of his suit. But is he relatable? Again, kinda. He's awkward, fumbles over his words, and he's the everyman's nerdy teenager who geeks out at stuff like robot arms and giant Ant-Man. But here's the problem with Homecoming. It's all a bit too perfect. The only real consequence to Peter's actions is his loss of the suit, and by the end of the movie, he gains the opportunity for an even better one. One of the key aspects that makes Parker relatable is his problems. MCU Spidey has no problems. He has to leave his first crush at prom. Man, somebody will call the Avengers. What happened to his money struggles? Why don't his academics suffer? Why doesn't his friendship suffer? Where's all the things that make putting on the mask such a hard decision? There's still time to fix this, and I hope they do, but these things are missing, and it makes him a lot less relatable, and his backstory a lot less impactful. Finally, why does Spider-Man PS4 take all of these aspects and absolutely ace them? I touched on the intro in the last episode and how fun it is, but really, the intro covers it all. It starts with a very slow pan of Peter's room. We see pictures of his aunt, his university days, his Uncle Ben, all his relationships and backstories that clearly have a big impact on him and his morals, or they wouldn't be there. We see his messy room, his empty vacation jar, littered sticky notes. It looks like our room. Then, like I mentioned, the song, the parkour, the whole alive vibe is perfect. So it's been about 3 minutes and he's already fun, relatable, and has an established backstory that we already know. Don't worry, the villains are done more than enough justice later on as well, but it's just the opening sequence. Give it time. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone because honestly, just play the damn game, or even just watch a playthrough online. But what I will say is that pretty much all of the main villains are directly influenced by Peter in some way after the very first mission states that Kingpin was keeping the city safe. It's only been one mission and they've already set up the entire plotline to be Peter's fault one way or another. And unlike the MCU, there's actual consequences. When he doesn't pay his bills in the beginning to go and instead fight Fisk, he's evicted. When he leaves MJ to go and fight crime, he ruins what he thinks is his last chance to get back with her. I could give more examples, but they're all heading into very vital spoiler territory, so I'll stop there, but you understand my point. The PS4 Spider-Man is Spider-Man. The only possible argument I can see is the fact that he's in his 20s. But I actually like that decision. It means many of the villains are already established. We don't need to suffer through yet another Uncle Ben scene, which we've seen so many times, it's kinda hard to feel bad for at this point. And they still manage to keep him relatable and relatively immature. He's grown up, but he isn't grown up. He's still this awkward, lovable, heart of gold teenager, but just an adult. His problems have just matured, not him. Besides, anybody in their 20s will tell you they don't feel like an adult. In a way, it's actually more endearing knowing that he remained this unflinching personality of humor and lighthearted fun despite all this. And there you have it. Spider-Man PS4 is the best Spider-Man I've seen since the original comics, and is probably even better than that, just because the format of a video game. And if Marvel want to do their best character justice, they'll follow this example. It's also all the reasons why I love Spider-Man. Thank you. Now I have to go read all of this out until my voice is hoarse and go mad listening to the Spider-Verse soundtrack on repeat. Hopefully you enjoyed this love letter, and I'm thinking to make this a series since I've done quite a few videos simply talking about why something is great. So if you guys could suggest any titles for the series or video ideas, I'd be happy to read them. But enough. The word count has already surpassed 2,500. Let my keyboard sleep.